Hey, everybody. Happy
Hello.
Friday.
Yeah, welcome.
Yeah, happy to wrap up the week and get ready for our journey to Vegas in
Yeah,
a couple of days.
it's
So,
time. That's next week.
yeah, we were chatting quite a bit about it this morning. It's like, okay, so what are we going to do? We
Mhm.
want to, besides seeing everybody and reconnecting with everybody, it's like, all right,
There's stuff.
there's
There's stuff to
stuff.
plan out.
Well, I mean, it's my birthday on Monday, so we were like,
Mhm.
let's go do a show. Let's go, a couple of fun things. So,
Mhm.
looking forward to that. We're going to be driving out there on Sunday so that we can have the whole day there on Monday.
Hi,
Good morning,
George.
George. Um,
Saw your text message this morning, George. Let's get together. So
yeah.
time to get together.
Besides NIDA, we do have the live event that is happening on August 1st coming up, which is on deal structure. And it's going to be a all day thing. And so if you are interested in participating, it's really going to be a lot of meat. A lot of meat.
I talked to somebody yesterday who's prepared to contribute thousands of contracts and history. So yeah,
Mhm.
I'll be knocking on the doors of all the people who are the data holders in
Mhm.
the industry. And
Yep. But we have two people that are coming forward with data, and so it will be thousands of points of data to take a
well,
look
you
at
say
what
two.
works.
I'm still knocking on doors, so I'm going to bring
Okay.
more.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, so far,
we'll have
um,
quite a few.
we'll have quite a
folks.
few. So the more the stronger the. And you can't lie. Numbers don't lie.
Yeah.
So with what works and all of that. So, yeah. You can find that the link to be able to register on bhphnationtv.com. Where also it will send you to a link to Eventbrite.
Mhm.
And whoever it is that registers for this as the live event will also get all of the recordings. So after the event is over, that you'll have access to those. That's part of your ticket.
Right.
So,
Yep.
all righty. Today's topic.
Today's topic is a tricky one, and it's something that I can nerd out on this kind of stuff. Obviously, when we see some of the conversations out there on social media, and this is the kind of conversation that I've been involved in since I first got in the buy here, pay here business. And you'll hear people talk about this kind of thing in different ways. I find it so interesting that there's so many differing views on the subject. So the topic really is, when does it make sense to trade a customer? If they still are carrying a balance with you, the car is still in good condition, when does it make financial sense to trade? And so I'm now up to 6 reasons to consider trading a customer early, whatever our definition of early is. Today, we're going to talk about the 30-month mark, trading a customer 30 months in. And there's a reason I picked that number, but we can get into that.
Most dealers, what we're finding, it's the 36 months is what it used to be.
Yeah.
All the, for everybody, it was 36 months. Now it's more like 42 plus for most people. I mean, there are some that we meet with that have held to the 36, sometimes even less.
Yeah, I've seen
but
shorter
for the most
recently,
part.
but yeah, it's if we talk about what I just call it mainstream, if you talk about the typical buy here, pay here dealer that we see out there, that's kind of representative of the main body of buy here, pay here. That's kind of what we talk about as mainstream. And I feel like the numbers I've got loaded up today are kind of in that realm. And so again, today we're just doing math. And so I think often people debate these kind of things. And I just think, some of this is about business model, but it's really like almost irrespective of your business model, the math is the math. So it's like,
Amen.
why all the debate?
Well, and it's, we talk frequently about straight lines and squiggly lines. Straight lines are it's measurable. They're it's there. A lot of times if all of the pieces are the same, it doesn't lie. It will tell you the thing. The intangibles about whether or not you have the infrastructure to be able to do that, if if it's like, I don't have the kind of relationship with my customers, there's a lot of other pieces, and also your deal structure. I mean,
Yeah.
or, you know, how you set up,
Yeah.
yeah, your deal
So
would
why
make a
don't we look at the
difference.
numbers and I can take
Okay.
folks inside what we've done. So this is part of kind of a broader study, so that folks can see and maybe just let me back up and help folks understand kind of what the layout is. Initially, I set out to do this as a study of you probably can't see the screen very well on the bottom. In fact, let me just kind of quickly make sure I hide some of this stuff and get in full screen mode. And maybe we can make it a little bigger so that people can see the
Yeah.
numbers. So give me just 1 second. It'll be worth it to get a little bit better zoom in here. Let's try 150%.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, much
Much
better.
better.
Okay.
So now what you've got here is I actually just used, in order to avoid, any question about calculations, I went out and just grabbed a loan calculator online. And, when you use those, it doesn't matter what the selling price is. You're just going on the finance amount. So what I've done is I've chosen $15,000 and I've chosen four different interest rates. Not for this model today, I picked one, but in my larger study, I'm comparing four different interest rates on a amortization of $15,000 and a payment of, I think I chose 450 a month. So I made it come out to 450 a month.
Hmm.
So just say, if a customer has got whatever the down payment is, the loan amount is 15,000. Okay.
Hmm.
And so now that payment is 450. So I picked for our analysis here today, I picked the one that is 22%. You see that right there. And now I've got a summary over here of what the amortization looks like. So I took this amortization of 22%, and it amortizes over, let's see, it runs out to 51 months before the final payment at that 22% interest, 450 a month. So now we just, like I say, that's the part that's just math. We can't debate that, you can choose a different calculator. It should produce the same amortization on this. So that part is really not up for debate. Now it's a question of how does it look when we trade this customer? Oh, do I need to expand this one too? It didn't follow.
Hmm.
Let's see. I thought I could do that. My apologies. Here we go. All right. So now in this summary page, you've got a breakdown of all these different numbers. And now when we get to the trade numbers, again, this is the one I picked that was 22%. And we'll come back another time and talk about how those amortizations compare the different interest rates. For today, I picked the 22%. And I have 30 days to first payment. The term comes out to be 4.3 years, or what did we say, 50 something months. But we're just looking at, okay, if that amortizes in that way, then obviously as the customer begins to make payments, then the principal balance goes down, in payment number two. And then I've hidden a big block over here to be able to show it all on one screen. I've hidden the payments of payment number 4 through payment number 26. And so it jumps right to 27. But let me take you through these other numbers. You've got a selling price of 15,000. To make things a little simpler, I just made the down payment the same as the add-ons, so that in this example, the amount financed is the same as the selling price. Okay. So you with me so far? I mean, I think
Yeah.
I'm just trying to make sure I explain everything. This has a total cost of $8,500, which gives us a gross profit of $6,500. And now we just finance that. Okay. There's a doc fee in there of 200 is what I chose. We can include that in the math. So now I walked out here to 30 months and let's start doing the math on what it looks like to trade. Oh, I got some other numbers to share quickly because some of the conversation, let me just pause for a minute. Some of the conversation that was spurred when we first put up a poll back in February.
It created a lot of conversation. Yeah.
Some really
Yeah.
interesting
Hmm.
and I don't know, people were energized. Like it was a pretty charged conversation around this topic. And it just is indicative of how people can view this thing so differently. And I think for me, it's like, I think we have to look at the math first. And that's what part of why I'm bringing this today is like, that we can't hide from the math. And now we can look at the other things besides the math.
Hmm.
But it's like, let me kind of walk through a quick example before we dive deep into these numbers. one of the things that happens in our industry, and I don't have a good way currently. I look forward to bringing this topic back to the morning show one day. But one of the things I've seen in the industry has been, and I'll just pick some numbers. A dealer says, I bought a car for $5,000. I got $1,000 down payment. So
Uh-huh.
I own the car for 4,000. Customer made one $500 payment, and then we repossess. So now, after a $500 payment, I own the car for $3,500. And now I finance it again, and I get $1,000 down. So now I own it for $2,500. And I just think that is nonsense. Like, that's just not that's a not accurate business. Okay. It's like, that's not really representative of, while it's interesting to think about, it's not true that you own the car for $2,500. So it's like, my approach generally would be, you own the car for whatever its value is at that time, irrespective of how many payments you've received on the car and all that kind of stuff. I understand why people might like to look at it, but I think from a pure business standpoint, it's not relevant. Okay. So
Mhm.
it kind of ties into this conversation here today, because it's it's kind of the thing about you're that makes you ignore all these other costs and all these other factors that go into producing a sale. And that's sort of like, if you're saying you own the car for $2,500, it's a little like saying, okay, I'm going to sell a car twice, but I'm only going to profit once. That's not good business, right?
Mhm.
So it's like you're ignoring all the cost of producing a lead, producing a sale, all your overhead along the way. I mean, there's just a lot of other factors that go into that, but we'll analyze that more deeply in the future. I just think it's important to kind of think about that mentality as we step into these numbers. Now let's jump back to this scenario at 30 months. We're saying the balance after the 30th payment is $8,000 principal, 8077.
So it's just a little over half of what the original
The original
financed amount is.
financed amount was. So
Mhm.
now what I left in here as an assumption that we could put in is, let's say the customer trades now. After that, making that 30th payment, we trade them in. So you can pick this number on the ACV that we put in here. And so you could tell me, if we were working through this for you, you could tell me whatever you feel like the ACV would be 30 months after the customer financed this car that you originally owned for $8,500.
Mhm.
I think the other reason I wanted to bring this conversation to the forefront is because the car that we purchased 30 months ago was when, let's see, 2 years ago was the middle of 2021.
Mhm.
So we're talking about early 2021 was 30 months ago. So this is the reason I think it's important for us to think about this in this industry, is because what happened in 2021, car prices skyrocketed. A lot of dealers tried to maintain their markup, so prices went up sharply, right? So that means contract length went up, or the payment went up, or some combination. Same
Mhm.
car we were buying before, same car with X number of miles, X model years old, same car. So now my concern is, as the market flattens on used car prices, what is the position of this customer at 30 months in? They owe $8,000, but what's the real value today of the car that you would trade in from them?
Mhm.
So that's what we have to look at. And I think the other piece and we'll get to a list that I prepared of 6 items that I think are not financial that we want to consider. And one of the things here for me is, this gives us an opportunity to look proactively at how to resolve some of this negative equity that's in most dealers' portfolios right now. We've got dealers or customers who are sitting on a contract where they owe a lot more because of the pricing that we had in 2021. And now we have to ask, okay, what's that? How do we resolve that? Because this is where, you remember, I was putting videos out a couple years ago saying we're in a tricky place. We're putting a lot of
Mhm.
false profit on our portfolios, and we need to be prepared. We need to have a strategy for dealing with that. So,
Mhm.
so again, you can pick the number. You tell me what this car's worth that you bought 30 months ago for $8,500. What's it worth? Let's change it. Let's make it $5,000 that you tell me that that's what that car's worth. So if that's true, then when we trade it in, here's the interest that we've earned from that customer across 30 months. All right. So can you see that? About $6,500 of finance income that we've enjoyed already. Now we have this trade in coming back in at $5,000. So let's look at what the trade looks like. Here's our payoff if we trade that customer in now. 8077. I use a trade allowance of 8077 internally. I'm writing off the balance that the customer owes, and I'm bringing in that $5,000 car. So
Can I
my,
ask a quick question
of
about that?
course,
Are there
yep,
tax implications on that?
yeah, yeah. There are. You're saying profit income.
Well, it's like if you're writing off a certain amount of that car, um, is that a tax
Yes, it reduces
savings?
it
Mhm.
does. And so I've allowed for that in that you've got that write off that you do charge off or write off. There's at least three different ways to handle this. It'd be an internal payoff. You could write it off, or you could charge it off, or at least three ways I can think of that you could resolve this
Okay.
balance that the customer owes after they're gone.
Okay.
Okay.
Or
Or
after they're out of this car.
yeah, or in the
Okay.
transaction, most software will allow you to address that and do the accounting in the transaction as you trade it in. But your bottom line is you're trading the
Mhm.
car in, and I'm saying we're allowing the customer 87 the full payoff. They're not going
Mhm.
to owe us anything on that negative equity. And now, so we move past the trade figures and we say, okay, what's the impact to us on cash flow? Well, if we go and replace the car that they bought, oh, by the way, I need to explain something else. For the sake of this illustration, to keep things simple, I'm operating on the idea that the customer trades into another car that is similar to the one they bought 2.5 years ago. So what that means is they're buying
It's
a
just
car.
newer.
It's newer.
Mhm.
In terms of the car that they currently own, it's newer. It's a couple years newer. It's got
The
lower
same kind
miles.
of like sedan, 4
It's
doors,
probably
Yeah.
roughly 40,000 miles lower,
Okay.
than the car they're currently driving because, if it's the same car, let's say
Mhm.
our business model stayed the same. So we're still pricing our cars at $15,000. So the customer just
Mhm.
steps into another car that's very similar, same payment. Okay.
Mhm.
So right now I'm operating as though we get no down payment. Let's look at that first. We get zero down payment from the customer in this scenario. What's the impact? Okay. So you got, again, from a cash flow standpoint, we're going to go negative replacing the car that they bought. We're going to have to go spend another 8,500 to fill that hole on the front line. We're going to liquidate the trade. Okay. So I don't want to spend a lot of time here, but I'm just saying the car has a value that is its value. So whatever that trade in is, that's its real market value. So regardless of whether you liquidate it at auction or keep it and finance it again, that's the cash impact to your business as you acquired a car that had a value of $5,000. So I'm treating that as cash impact. Down payment on the new sale, again, I've got a zero. We've got the cost of funding the TTNL. So you've got, in this case, 1,025 because of that 1,225. I'm showing 200 as a doc fee. So we have to fund that. So now our internal trade payoff, internal cash impact, zero. We're writing it off. We're not writing a check. If we do, it's going to us. So the impact of the internal trade is zero. So our negative cash uh, or the net cash impact of that transaction is $4,500 negative cash. So again, just all we've done is replace the car we sold, liquidated potentially the car that they traded in, and we're at $4,500 negative to make that trade today. Okay. Or at least by the close of the month when we replace the car. And now, if we look at the impact to the profit and loss, your gross profit from the new sale, because we do have a new sale that's occurring, and with our doc fee factored in there, we've got $6,700 of new profit. We have the write off of the old account of 8 grand, and we don't have any interest earned in the transaction. The impact of the acquired trade to the profit and loss is zero. We basically added to our inventory. We sold the car. It reduced our inventory. So the impact to the P&L is zero. And so now our profit then on the transaction by my calculation, and I'm not an accountant, but I had a couple of accountants look at this and they don't find any problems with the math. So you're at a negative $1,400 of profit. So what that means is, we effectively created a new sale and we experienced no and one other quick thing on this. I recognize that in most states, sales tax is calculated on trade difference. So this, I've actually overstated the sales tax side of this because you really probably wouldn't have this much sales tax that you would owe because of the trade. Okay. But we did a trade, we got profit on the new sale, And because we wrote off, we're actually showing negative profit as a result of trading a customer into another car, which means we have no income tax impact from that. And look, let's keep it simple. Let's say this is all inside a buy here, pay here sales operation. Forget the RFC piece. Like this is the RFC thing is done for tax purposes, right? It's like, so we can really almost ignore that for this sake and just look at it as if it's all happened inside our buy here, pay here operation. So now let's look at the balance sheet. What happened to our balance sheet? Well, our notes receivable went up from the new sale by 16.2. Okay. And our trade payoff. So we wrote off the trade is the way that I've handled it here. So that's a negative impact to the balance sheet. That old account balance goes away. The cash account goes down by that $4,500 we showed above. And that means that our total impact of the balance sheet was $3,600. We went
In
up
the
in
positive.
assets. Yeah, our assets increased by $3,600 as a result of that trade. And now, if we do not trade this customer, I just picked 12 months. If you look at the next 12 months of income of interest from this customer, if we don't trade, we're only going to see $1,300 of interest income on that transaction, that amortization that is still running. Okay. But if we trade, we basically reset the clock, right? We increase the note balance again, and the customer stays with us. And now our income from that new
From the
account,
customer.
from the customer is now a little over 3,000, almost $3,100. So again, it's just math. Like this is the impact to you as a dealer if you were to trade that customer in that way. $8,100 account balance, $5,000 actual cash value. Go ahead.
Okay. And so, like, this is just for a specific customer. They've traded in the car, they've got a new car. This is for this customer or this vehicle.
Correct.
Okay. So, but this vehicle has more life.
Right. It's got lower miles.
And so it's got a few more miles, but it has more life. So are you going to talk about how now this vehicle goes back into inventory and how that affects
the trade-in? No, I didn't look at the trade-in. I think I think the simplest way to think about that is that $5,000 that we brought back in from the trade. I think the simplest way to think about it, to avoid confusing anybody, is just imagine you just ran it at the auction and sold it for cash.
Okay.
It's a new transaction irrespective. It's not related.
So if you
to this
did just send it to the auction, sell it for cash, and then this is the only impact that vehicle has on your portfolio is this right here, which is a positive $3,600 compared to, yeah.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. It's like it's different things. And this is a good illustration of how buy here, pay here can be a little tricky, because you can see how different the impact to the cash flow, the P&L, and the balance sheet. They're all very different things.
And tax. Yeah.
Income tax?
Income tax
Yeah.
too.
Income tax is, and we could say that affects cash. Well, in this case, we created a sale without creating profit, you could say. So we didn't experience any income tax as a result of that transaction. You follow that? We created a sale. And we can talk about a little bit, I think, before we dive away from this. I think that question you have about that other car and the impact of the trade, this kind of goes back to that thing we talked about earlier. It's like, I think if you just, in its simplest form, imagine that you took this trade and you just liquidated it. Let's say you're trading in a red sedan, you run it to the auction, you sell it for $5,000, you bring back a blue pickup truck instead. You take your $5,000 and you buy a new truck for $7,500 or whatever the number is. It's cash. So I think you can confuse the thing by saying, you got this trade and you're going to do something. It's a different transaction and it's cash to you. You could choose to liquidate or not liquidate, but it's still just cash to you. And the cash value is really just whatever the market value is. So when we start to calculate, will I really own the car for this? No, you own the car for whatever its market value is today. You own the car for whatever its market value is today, because if you opt not to sell it, that's what you're forgoing. Okay.
Mhm.
So that's why it's better to just think it's cash. It's just a trade-in, it's just cash. Okay. So now let's talk about, I've got some items listed down here that are other non-financial reasons to look at this. You want to try to increase it, expand
Yeah,
it?
if you want
Okay.
to.
Let me try to jump it up a little bit more.
George in Florida says, if I follow correctly, the dealer would receive approximately double the amount from his consumer if they traded than if they didn't.
Say that again.
George says, so if I follow correctly, the dealer would receive approximately double the amount from this customer if they traded than if they didn't.
When you say double the amount, I think they receive double the finance income. So I think I left out that the way I treated this is, let's assume, just to keep things, again, we get too many variables and it gets too confusing. But what I've done here, George, is just take the same, it's the same customer. I assume their income is the same. Their qualifications are roughly the same. And I look at this thing as though the finance income, the payment's going to be the same. I'm keeping their payment the same because their income's the same. So all I really did is trade them out into a car that's my same business model. It's going to have the same selling price. My cost will be what my cost is. And now my income from the customer cash is just the same payments I was collecting already. So it doesn't change that part. My payments from the customer for the next 12 months are going to be 450 a month times 12.
Mm-hmm.
The cash from the customer is still the same, but the profit represented
Mm-hmm.
in that cash from the finance income is different because I've got a larger contract and we've basically reset the account balance. And so I think the things that for us to think about, let me kind of go through this list and let's talk about these things that we need to anticipate, because there are some intangibles to consider. Use the math in your favor.
And
So
win.
yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just math. Like I
Yeah.
say, is that's kind of what the folks on Wall Street are doing, right? Is they're playing
Math.
the math, and
Mhm.
the numbers are the numbers. But
So,
so
and are we moving into
yeah,
the
and this
like the
list,
non-tangible?
yeah,
These are the non-financial things
uh-huh.
that you'd consider.
So you reduce the chance of customer repairs. Car's aging, it's getting higher miles on it. It's starting to have some squeaks and rattles that weren't there when the customer bought the car, whatever. And we assume a newer car with lower miles. As I said, it's the same program. So if the customer steps into the same kind of car they bought before, they're now stepping into a car that's got roughly 40,000 miles less than the one they're driving,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a couple of model years newer. So they're basically resetting, and we can say that they're reducing the chance of repairs because the car is declining in age, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is, the next thing is that the length of the relationship is extended with a customer that we know.
Well, and there's so many pieces to that
Mhm.
just in itself because we talk about cost of acquisition
Sure.
of a new customer.
Mhm.
And this means and that's kind of, it's a cost, it's a business cost, not a you're saving yourself that cost of acquisition for bringing in a new customer, a
I've got
new,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, I
So,
listed that too. So
okay.
yeah, that's kind of also a related thing.
Oh,
And
okay.
George
Yeah.
raised a very good point that I didn't have in there, and I'll just add it to my list here. But if you don't trade them out, you risk losing them to someone else.
Amen.
So this is proactively keeping a good customer in your portfolio,
Mhm.
and we can do a
And you
whole
don't
separate
have to,
episode
you
on what the
don't
definition.
necessarily have to offer all of your customers this option to trade in if you don't
No,
want
but
to.
if they've made it to 30 months, I would say
Yeah,
that's a
that's
pretty good
pretty
definition
good.
of a good
Yeah,
customer. I
true.
know Tommy Brandis would agree with me. It's like, if that customer's made it to 30 months, then, we know that charge-offs usually happen
Mhm.
9 to 12 months. So if we're
Yeah.
at 30 months, we've got a customer who has performed well. If their situation is stable, then yeah, I think
Mhm.
we want to keep that customer with us. And there's a nice training way to help make this easy for the customer. And part of this is, again, we've modeled all this out with no down payment from the customer. So we're
So
looking
it's
at
like,
the
what are
impact to
they
us.
out?
Right.
They're only out nothing.
Yeah. And we can go back before we wrap up
Yeah,
here.
so
We can go
it's like a
back and put
win-win.
in a down payment and show what the impact is. But it's, I think it's better to look at it first without any down payment from the customer. we look at the benefits and disadvantages to us if we trade the customer with no down payment whatsoever. And so the other thing is we know this customer. Alternatively, we could keep this car on our lot and choose to finance it to somebody fresh. And we
Mhm.
could say, okay, now I keep the original customer and I create
Get
a new sale from that one vehicle. I've seen that
Mhm.
argument. And that while that's true, we don't know this new customer. And so we've got greater risk with that new customer than we do with this existing
Mhm.
customer. Okay. So,
But when we're done with this list, Tyler's asking how do the numbers change if you get a new 10% down? So
okay,
we
we'll
can
go
go look
back
at
and do
that in
that.
just a
Yep.
second.
So the third one is it can be regarded as a bonus sale. So what I mean by that is you're out there driving leads and marketing to create a funnel of traffic, and you're going to close a certain percentage of those, and that's going to lead to, let's pick 25 sales a month. Well, this is a sale that you didn't have to advertise to produce. So if you trade this
Mhm.
customer in, it's a bonus sale. Now we're at 26 sales for the month. And so it's like picking up a bonus sale. We acquired the trade when it is in good condition because we know month number 31 could be when the transmission goes down. So let's just
Yeah.
consider that. If we can get this trade back in while it's got good turnaround market value, that's worth something to us. So let's not discount that element. Okay. And so, what is then the cost to acquire the customer?
It's
It's
effectively
effectively zero.
zero.
Customer walked in to make a payment and we
Mhm.
said, come here, let me show you this. And we traded them into another car. And my cost to acquire that customer was none, zero.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's a factor, and so
Mhm.
we can look at the cost of acquiring all the customers. So again, it's one more piece to think about when we look at what is the benefit of having these repeat sales. Okay, so now the other one I
Mhm.
listed there was it proactively resolves this negative equity thing that
Mhm.
I've been concerned about. And I think as dealers look at that, you could go to your own portfolio now and probably run a sweep of your portfolio and say, what's the customer's account balance and what's the real market value of this trade?
Mhm.
You'd need to probably have some sort of
Mhm.
updated mileage number from them. But
Mhm.
I'm just saying, let's be proactive about that as dealer
Yeah.
financiers. Let's not let that turn ugly, because what happens if this car gets um, you know, either it becomes a skip account, maybe, or whatever, it degrades. The car just degrades. So it's that transmission scenario. Now what? Now where does that leave us? We're writing off. We got a car that has no real market value, and so forget the idea that you're going to put a transmission in it, because what you would own that car for is whatever its real cash value is
True.
before the repairs. That's what you're recovering
Yeah.
in terms of collateral. And so we need to try to avoid that scenario and try to bring the car back in. So again, I just think the negative equity thing,
Mhm.
we want to spread that. And so I think
Mhm.
our buy here, pay here operators right now are potentially in a difficult place. Long contracts, customers still owe a lot on these cars that were sold in 2001. And so if we ignore that and transmission goes down tomorrow, where does that leave us? Where does it leave the
Mhm.
customer? And so I think this is
Yeah.
why another reason that for me, it's like we can start to spread that negative equity
Mhm.
across a few contracts
Mhm.
and play a longer game that we encourage anyway in buy here, pay here. But I'm just saying, if we
Oh,
ignore that
yeah.
negative equity, then it's going to potentially bite us and bite the customer. And so I'm just saying,
Yeah.
let's look at this and try to avoid this.
Well, while you're loading up, if you did a 10% down
Mhm.
payment, I think that there's like a white hat type of benefit to a customer.
Okay.
And the benefit is, especially if you do a zero down.
Mhm.
Well, let me put it this way. All of us out there are consumers of vehicles. Poor
Mhm.
credit, great credit, whatever. We're consumers of vehicles. And most people want to change their car every 3 years or so. I mean,
Mhm.
that's like most people. Most people, you know, it's just I think it's kind of like it's a human consumer feeling attitude.
Mhm.
And if you have the ability to be able to thrill and delight your customer, our customers, every 36 months
Mhm.
and get a new car, same payment, just bring it in. No, zero down, just bring it in.
Right.
And we're going to trade you in and get you in a new car, lower miles, better condition. And, create this. What a great opportunity to create an immense amount of goodwill with your consumer base.
Mhm.
I mean, immense amount of goodwill.
Sure.
And so this is just like one piece of things that you can do to be
Mhm.
able to be known, liked, and trusted by
Sure.
your consumers, by our customers.
Yeah. And so one of the things that happens, Tyler, and this is where you can kind of get into these circular things. Tyler Simmons was asking about what if you put 10% down? So I went back up
Okay.
and did that. And at first I thought, well, there may be a problem with my formulas, but I realized now what's happening is when I put in 1,500 down, let me go back to where it was and show you. Let me get it where you can see the cash flow, the P&L, and the balance sheet all on the same screen. So when I change this to 0, obviously it affects our cash. It does not affect the P&L because cash is not profit to us. It doesn't change the profit on the sale. The profit is the profit. The down payment is just the way you finance the profit or you finance the sale price. So it doesn't move the P&L. It moves the balance sheet, or it doesn't actually move the balance sheet because what you increase in cash, you reduce in receivables. So in fact, you would have less financed amount on the new sale, which would mean a little less interest income across the next, coming months. And I need to double check that part down here because it looked like that number did not change. Because if you do get the 1,500 down payment, that is going to reduce the note amount. And I just don't have it modeled out that way, Tyler. Like I don't have it modeled out to reduce the finance amount on the new contract. So that's something I can correct, but it's like you just basically you're from a P&L standpoint and a balance sheet, it doesn't move the P&L and it doesn't move the balance sheet because what we gained in cash, we lost in receivables. So while we would all rather have the cash than the receivables, it's still just when we think about the impact to this, then yes, but from a cash standpoint, if we put that $1,500 down in, then we're negative cash 3 grand instead of 4,500. And I think what some would say is that down payment really a difference in success? It's definitely a difference in our bank account balance, but is it a different does it help the customer to be more successful? Is the customer have a chance does the customer have a chance to be successful even if I do no down payment versus the 1,500? If so, we're financing more.
Well, and that's like a whole nother conversation, like with
Kind
the
of, yeah.
folks of NEO, where they said down payments, what they have found, down payments have little to no correlation to success of loan.
Yeah, and so the question, but I think the bigger question for me is it because we're not getting down payment from the customer that we're choosing not to trade? Because down payment is just one factor of all the things we've talked about here. Down payment is just one factor. And so I think we have to look at that and say, are we choosing not to trade because the customer doesn't have down payment? Because I'm seeing in the math that I would be inclined to I'd be inclined to trade even with no down payment based on everything that I see. Because again, it's a bonus sale for me. It's a customer that I have some history with. And so my chance of, and I'm like George, I think George is onto something where he's just, I don't want to risk losing the customer to somebody else.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
been,
Well, and he also piped in a little bit later and says this is kind of one of the marketing pitches for leases. And so, lease, it really is.
Yeah.
And, we're fans of both.
Yeah.
It just kind of depends on, how,
it's, and
what kind
I
of
just had
model
a
you
meeting,
want.
I had a meeting this week, with the folks over at LHPH Capital, and we plan to model out exactly that. We're going to model the lease numbers right next to this so that, dealers can see, nobody's pitching leasing or retail. Like this is numbers. It's just math, and you can decide what makes most sense for your business model. But I think, yeah, you're right. When we start to look at this and you start to think about this, what would a lease look like? If you had a certain residual or whatever, then, it could be something similar. But yeah, I think for today, it was just, let's just let's look at the hard math and
Numbers
let it,
don't lie.
let it tell us what it tells us, and then you
Absolutely.
can make a better judgment.
I learned something.
Good.
Yeah, it was, and yeah.
Yeah, me too. I learned I should call George before I start the show and make sure I got all his tips.
Actually, we should call George and say, what should we talk about next?
Yeah, for sure.
So one thing, we do broadcast this through all of our social media channels, and you can actually watch the video. If you're listening to this on a syndicated podcast station, you can go to YouTube and see the video. It would be really helpful for you to see the video of all the charts and watch the math move as Jim is putting in down payments. We try to talk through it, but there's a lot of nuances that you don't get when you're just listening to a podcast. So please go to our YouTube channel, Jim and Michelle Rhodes / the Octane Group, and you can see and watch and see, see all of the
It's probably easier to just search BHPH Morning Show. There's a whole
Morning
playlist.
Show.
We put all of our morning shows in place.
Like and subscribe. Like and subscribe. And if you subscribe, then it actually will send you a notification that says, hey, Jim and Michelle are about ready to go live, or hey, there's a new recording in there so that you can watch.
And a quick mention before you start the music that our session next Thursday morning will be at 9 a.m.
9 a.m.
Pacific time. That's the Las Vegas time. So it'll be noon Eastern. And we have got that already set up to broadcast, with NIAD's permission. We're broadcasting the session, which will include Hugo Sanchez and Mark Burkholder. We're going to dig into strategic planning for buy here, pay here.
And Mark has sent me some stuff from Peachtree Planning that I'm like, this is powerful for a dealer as well. Some materials that we're going to give you all access to.
So you can find that live event on all the channels where you would normally find the morning show.
Yep.
It's going to be in a couple of Facebook groups. It'll be in YouTube and LinkedIn and all the normal channels. So you can find it. And we invite you, for those of you who cannot be in the session room with us in Las Vegas, then we hope you'll tune in live, and you can find it live or archived. So good stuff coming next week. We're excited to be in Vegas. Looking forward to a smoked old fashioned with friends.
Yes. And just before we leave, George, love it or leave it. I really love the idea. Very much so. Okay. So thank you everybody for joining us on this Friday. We're looking forward to seeing everybody in Vegas on Monday I think we're going to go to the cocktail.
Yeah. Cigars and
martinis or something at the Wynn in Las Vegas on Monday evening. Have a great day, everybody. We really appreciate you joining us today. Thanks so much.